It's been 2 weeks since I was at the first ever Games 2025, and this is my first time getting back to recording in my own space. So, welcome back to Shock's Talks. I'm Shakti, and this channel is all about anomalous phenomena. I read and I research in my free time. I'm an artist and a creative director by day. But my passion is consciousness studies and UFOs and aliens and UAP and psychic abilities and even witchcraft. So this is what this channel is about, and everything is organized in playlists. So if you go back to the beginning and watch everything in order, what you're going to get is an onboarding to UFO history that leads us deeper into remote viewing, that then brings us into consciousness. All the while, I'm tying in personal stories and experiences and my perspective as a person who grew up with a yogic background. And so I'm looking at ancient Vedic and Hindu concepts and philosophies and kind of describing how they relate to modern day theories of consciousness, which is pretty popular and a lot of people do that. So nothing new. So if you're already deep into this will be a great episode for you. But if you're brand new to the topic of remote viewing, I went ahead and put together a playlist that is just all about that. So I found all the episodes that I've done that I felt like were either directly about remote viewing or related to it. And that's linked for you in the description box below. Every time I post, I will have links in the description box if you scroll down through it. And if you're into this stuff, please subscribe to the channel and like the video if you enjoy what you hear. So let's get into it. Today we're going to talk about remote viewing, and this is more for people that are already familiar with it, like I said. And before we get into the remote viewing, I wanted to give you a couple of updates in the kind of UAP UFO realm, because the New Paradigm Institute, headed by Danny Sheehan, just sent out another newsletter like they do, and there were some cool announcements. So the first one is that there's going to be a podcast now, a weekly podcast called Full Disclosure with Danny Sheehan, UFOs, Aliens, and Cover-Ups. I've linked it below for you. And this is in partnership with Spectre Vision, which is a production company co-founded by Elijah Wood, apparently. And the first episode is going to dig into Danny Sheehan's background as a lawyer and all of the really interesting work he's done throughout his career. So I'll definitely be watching that. If you want to watch that, you can learn all about Danny Sheehan. And he's a very important person to know about if you're interested in the legislation around UAP transparency and the sharing of information and turning over things that have been created based on crash retrieval programs, physical stuff, craft, bodies, whatever they have. It's all about bringing that out into the open and definitely getting it under congressional oversight at the very least. And then they also mentioned in the New Paradigm Institute newsletter that there will be another UFO hearing confirmed for September 9th. I'm just going to read to you what they said. In other critical news, momentum continues to build on Capitol Hill. Representative Eric Burleson has confirmed that the next public UFO hearing is scheduled for September 9th, according to reporting by the Liberation Times, which I haven't read in a while. I should definitely go back and read that because it's a really good one. This hearing could feature as many as 5 witnesses and be one of the most revealing congressional sessions to date. While Representative Burleson did not provide new information on the House version of the UAP Disclosure Act, nor confirm whether it has officially been filed in the House, he did acknowledge that the UAPDA has not yet been included in the Senate's final draft. This means the future of the legislation remains in limbo, as it has been, kind of ever since it was first introduced. And hence, citizen engagement will be critical in the weeks ahead. So the New Paradigm Institute is the website to go to if you want to engage. And they make it super, super easy. So it's a cool thing to do. They also mentioned this Jesse Michels American Alchemy episode, which I had also watched on the Nazca Mummies. Another great, fun documentary by Jesse Michels, mini doc or whatever, where he actually goes to Peru, I believe it was. And he looks at these mummies with the scientists who have like analyzed them, and there are more tests that they want to do. There's more to dig into. So he really just talks about some of the questions around these different various mummies. There's different kinds, there's different stories that go along with them. Some seem more legit than others. Some seem really almost irrefutable, while others seem to be clearly fabricated from the bones of various different animals put together to look like a little tiny human mummy. Others are actually models that were made of the original mummy that was found. So there's like a bunch of different layers to this story. And it's really interesting, really fun documentary. I don't know, I'm calling it that. It's an episode. He does this stuff all the time, but he does it at a very high level. So that is American Alchemy with Jesse Michels with no A. It's just ELS at the end. And now we're going to talk about remote viewing. So I found the remote viewing part of the Psy Games the most interesting, even though it was a bit clunky at first because it was the first time putting it on stage and, you know, like figuring out how this was really going to go. But remote viewing is such an interesting, such a strange and specific way to access a psi ability. I almost wonder at times if it's almost like this backwards way of going about things, because instead of being able to grab a hold of the whole picture like a psychic might be able to do, or someone who's having an out-of-body experience, remote viewing specifically involves identifying components, deconstructed components of the target. So for example, if I was talking to you about something on this table in front of me, and I said, silver with bumpy ridges and smooth surfaces, there's something cylindrical, there's something mesh-like, there's something red and glowing, it has no smell, there's no important atmosphere around it, the function relates to audio. That's like me remote viewing this microphone in a way, but like you need someone else almost to put all those pieces together, or you need to be able to do that in your own mind. So it's instead of me just saying to you like, there's a microphone in front of me, and then describing it, or sending you a visual image of the mic, or opening your inner eye so that you could experience the mic and just know it for yourself. It's this other very funny and specific way of transmitting that data. So why is it a thing even? Well, go back to my playlist to look into the history of remote viewing. It's interesting how we got here, but the short of it all is that the US wanted to compete with Russia when they caught wind of this psychic spy program that was going on in the 70s, and so, or even before that. And so they started training people to do this protocol, and it was used in a lot of military applications at first in order to go places with your mind that your body can't go safely, you know? And some of the really good remote viewers were what you would call a natural psychic, and those people did have really clear visuals, and sometimes they were good at art and they could do like a really detailed sketch, and they weren't just doing like circle, squiggle, line, dot, 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 you know, they were doing like, here is a circle of trees, and in it there's this octagonal form, and there's, you know, they're doing a much more sophisticated sketch. So it's a fun thing to practice, but what I like about remote viewing is that it's almost like a little exercise to get you closer to those other full psychic abilities. For example, how doing isolations is something that you would practice in order to be a great dancer. Isolations are not a dance, it's not choreography, it's just little simple movements with one part of the body at a time, but it prepares you to be a good dancer. I think remote viewing is similar. I think it really helps us to do a couple of very important things when it comes to accessing and interpreting psychic data. Number one, it's training to really understand the difference between a piece of data that's coming through and analytical overlay or the mental chatter that wants to create a story about that data. And this is very important for every person who is even a little bit psychic, because it is so easy to catch a vibe and then add a story to it, and you don't even know you're doing it. It's almost unconscious. It can happen so quickly. And remote viewing trains you to sense the difference between those types of chunks of data or pieces of information or whatever you want to call it. So a remote viewer who I really like is Tracey Garbutt Dolan. And she is, sorry, it's very dry here with allergies right now. Tracey Garbutt Dolan is the wife of Richard Dolan, and just like watch all of Shock's Talks if you want to know about Richard Dolan, because I talk about him all the time because he's amazing. He's a historian who studies UFOs, UFO history. Tracey Garbutt Dolan, his wife, is also a researcher, and they work very closely together on a number of things, but she has a background in remote viewing, and she has some really great stories about it. And she's a great speaker, and she's just been lecturing more over the last couple of years. So I've seen her in person a couple times, and the members only channel on Richard Dolan's site shared some videos of her lecturing at a UFO conference that I wasn't at. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about what she said, because you might not have access to those if you're not a member. You could go and sign up if you like what you hear. I'm not going to repeat her whole speech, not by any means, but I am going to share some things that I thought were really special that she said. And she's very she's an academic, but she also embodies this kind of soulful heart, I would say. She doesn't talk about it that way, but that's what I get from her. She seems like a very heartfelt person, but she's very smart and very analytical, and she's married to Richard Dolan, so they're having intellectual conversations with coffee in the morning and talking about aliens at night. It's my dream relationship. I want this for myself. Anyway, she talked a little bit about the types of people that get into anomalous phenomena and why. And this has cropped up on podcasts like the UFO Rabbit Hole. I believe that back in, wasn't that long ago, but this great podcast, Aliens and Artists, or Artists and Aliens. Aliens and Artists with Stuart Davis. Not the Stuart Davis of the Wilson Davis memo, if that was his name. Oh my God, I'm getting confused. Don't let me get off track here. Aliens and Artists, go look it up. That podcast talked a little bit about this, and there are others, but basically she talks about how you might go to these conferences, for example, alone, and you feel very isolated and you're searching for answers, and you're walking around in your regular life, not when you're at a conference or something, but in regular life, you're walking around with this deep inner world and deep inner knowing of experience that many other people cannot relate to. And that's an extremely isolating experience. And you might not even have words for what you went through. And you might have gone through things like sleep paralysis, out-of-body experiences that were spontaneous, lucid dreams, precognition. She calls contact that happens in dreams suspected contact or suspected dream contact. And then encounters was on her list as well. And then she talked about for her, how looking towards her deathbed, she knew that an ultimate regret would be not admitting to herself that these things were actually happening. And I thought this was such an important and interesting point, because that really does separate the two categories of people who have had anomalous experiences. You have the ones who really dig into it, and you have the ones who just deny and forget and let it kind of slip away. And she decided to really dig into it and she's spent her life researching, and I can relate. And she got to this point where she realized that her own parameters is what she wanted to push and explore. So, like, how do I evolve my own mind? What is this underlying restlessness in all of us that we feel the need to be connected to something else? And then she talks a lot about how mind, not space, is the final frontier. So that's kind of the vibe. And then she goes deep into a lot of details about remote viewing and different experiences that she's had and what might be happening in these virtual realms, you know, consciousness realms. And she talks about overlays. Her definition of an overlay, we're not talking about the analytical overlay in remote viewing, but a reality overlay would be like, for example, if you just turned and looked out whatever environment you're in right now and you see the regular world that is what it is, and then almost like a VR, AR overlay, semi-transparent image pops up in your reality of a different reality right in front of your eyes. I've had this happen before on multiple occasions. The biggest one was like I was on a rooftop parking lot looking down at the street across from me on the sidewalk, and the overlay took up like a whole wall of a building. It was a big one. And then I've had like little overlays, like a screen appearing above my bed at night in the air, you know, things like that. And so she talked about having that experience. She tells a story about her dad and having this overlay of seeing him, and it was this message that ultimately helped to prepare her for his passing that was very unexpected. And so basically she's kind of tying these very anomalous things to the personal, and, you know, starting by saying, you know, this is the feeling of people that enter into this field of study often, and this is how these psychic abilities can like really integrate into your life experience in meaningful ways. Not that we make it that way, it just happens that way. And then that can lead us to the research and the study and the development of these things. And this is what Pam Coronado was saying about her own psychic abilities, and she's someone who worked for the police to find missing people and things like that, because she was so good at basically remote sensing, but it was happening spontaneously at first. She didn't want it to happen. She was seeing through the eyes of the victim all of a sudden. And so if you're someone who has had like a handful of anomalous experiences, or maybe you've had them all your life, or maybe you just had your first one recently, but it wasn't something that you meant to happen, it just happened. That can be the beginning to moving into the next levels of like control and harnessing your abilities and your powers, you could say. And that's why I liked the Psy games in general, because I think that's what that's all about, is like putting it in the context of like a sport or a game means that you can train for it, and you can be coached, and you can get better, and you can compete with yourself, and you can encourage other participants, and you can pave the way for someone else, and you can be the first brave person that like opens the door for that other person who's been hiding in the shadows this whole time, you know. So that was kind of the vibe of the Psy games, and I really like that energy. One thing that I thought was interesting from her talk that I want to start including in my remote viewing sessions is this idea of personal inclemency, PI, or AV, which is advanced visuals. These are two different notes that she would put on her sessions. The PI is kind of like, I had 5 cups of coffee today, or I'm remote viewing after I smoked some weed, or I'm remote viewing on very little sleep, or it's like your current state and how that impacts the session. Very interesting thing to track. I ate sugar before this, whatever it may be. The AV, the advanced visuals, is like if you connect to the target before you start really like going category by category and trying to get information, and you just get flooded with like boom, 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 boom. Here's a couple like ideas, impressions, words, whatever. That is the advanced visuals. It's like they're coming in advance of whatever category, or it's not just visuals, it could be anything, but those are things that we could add to like our remote viewing journaling to see how we're doing with all of that. Tracey has some really great personal stories about her own experience with remote viewing, but those are hers, and I'm not going to share them right now, but I have all the notes because I thought it was really interesting, and you should check out, just Google her, Tracey Garbutt Dolan, and see what you find, or look on YouTube and see if you can find some talks. And if you have the chance to see her speak at any of the conferences, go and do it, because she's up and coming, and I think she's going to have a lot more to say. She's kind of warming up, you know? I mean, she's been in this for a long time, but it's like she's coming out more and more to share her thoughts and her research. She's not like someone who wants to be in the spotlight. And then she talked about how dreams are a gateway. And if you've been watching Shock's Talks, you know that I went on a 40-day kind of dream quest with myself. And it's interesting. That was almost like preparation for something that I didn't know was going to happen. So before I went to the Psy Games for 40 days leading up to it, I was taking a break from substances. I was really watching what I was eating. I was going to yoga. I was dancing. I was writing down my dreams every morning and sometimes multiple times throughout the night. And I thought I was going to go on this trip and have a great time at the Psy Games, go visit my family, come home super refreshed, hit the ground running, crush it at work, just like feel amazing, look amazing. Like I had this whole like vision for myself of just like, I'm going to feel so good. And then life just kind of sucker punched me. Like I went to the games were cool. My dog was getting sick. I didn't notice what was happening because we were traveling. He had some underlying issues that I wasn't really aware of, and they were starting to act up, and the family trip was good, but it was like very chaotic and stressful, and I didn't get any alone time, and I didn't stay where I thought I was going to stay, and that caused a chain reaction of like certain emotional responses in me. And then when I got home, I drove home from the airport, and my car broke down on the way home right before we got into town, which was like an hour from the airport, and my radiator burst. And then my dog got really, really sick and went from like 0 to 100 in like the course of like 3 days, and it was super scary, and I had to go through this liminal kind of like death exploration in my mind around like what was going to happen. And I mean, I'm still kind of in that. I've been in that for 2 weeks. He's still going through a lot, and every day is very hard right now, but I love him so much, and I'm honored that, you know, we get to go through this together, but it has not been easy. And so I wasn't expecting all this, you know, and I kind of thought afterwards that like this dream quest that I was on was almost like this weird cleanse to get me ready to deal with like hard stuff. And I thought it was just going to be like a cleanse for my psyche to get me ready to just like meet cool psychic people and come back feeling super empowered. It was kind of both. But to be honest, my dreams got even more interesting after I stopped the dream quest. Like I have not been consistently waking up and typing out my dreams or anything like that, but I jot down a couple things here and there just to keep it fresh and keep myself remembering. But my dreams have continued to be really interesting. I've had, over the last couple weeks, a handful of small precognitive dreams where just a little thing happens and it relates to something that happens the next day or a piece of information. I've started to relate my remote viewing practice to the dream practice because I'm realizing that like sometimes the dream just shares one piece of data from the target, which is like the event that's going to happen the next day or whatever. It's not a target because I don't know that but just to relate it to remote viewing. it's the deconstructed element that I'm getting. I'm getting a piece of data and I'm not really knowing what it means in the moment. But the more I practice these skills, the more I can better interpret those dreams, and I can understand like when the dream world is telling me something and when it's just my own, what I call my subconscious mishmash. You know what I mean? So I wanted to show you this. I think I showed it last time, but this is my little journal that I got from Chase, the creator of this site, socialrv.com, social-rv. And these are like what my remote viewing sessions look like. You know, I have the target number, my ideogram, my descriptive words, my little sketches, my whatever. It's all pretty, you know, not very deeply in depth. Wow, I can talk. It's not, the sketches are not super detailed. I'm still just doing like basic shapes and gestures. But what I wanted to talk about is I analyzed my own sessions. On the site, you can analyze each session, and then I wanted to take a look at all of them. So what I did is I wrote down all of my scores, my self-score, and then my AI comparative judging. So the self-score is you judging yourself how you did, which is the most important score, I think, on here. The AI comparative judging is doing something that people used to do when they remote viewed, which is like the moderator. I forget what their name is. There's like a person, the tasker or something. They're like judging your session against your other sessions, if that makes sense. So on this site, the AI is comparing my session that I submit to 9 random other ones that I've done to see how well I did, basically. And so what I found is that I wanted to see, like, where am I landing? Like, am I doing okay? So, like, 2 times I got a 0%. Like, a 0 out of 7 was my score. The scoring goes 1 to 7 on the site. Number 4 in that is good correspondence with several matchable elements intermixed with some incorrect information. Number 7 is excellent correspondence, including good analytical detail, like naming the target, and with essentially no incorrect information. To me, that's almost like out of body or something. It's like full on remote sensing. If you can get really what it is completely, then you're going beyond the basics, you know. But number 4 is just you did good, kid. You got some stuff. You got a couple things that were not right, but you got quite a few things that were right. And then there's like 0 is no correspondence, you know, and 1 is little correspondence. So I got, out of my 28 sessions, I got 0 twice. I got a 1 twice. I got a 3 out of 7 4 times. I got a 4 out of 7 the most times, 9 times. So that is like good correspondence, 9 times out of 28 sessions so far. And then above that, a 5 out of 7, that's like a lot of matched elements and not a lot of incorrect information. I got that 6 times. And then the 6 out of 7 is my highest score that I've ever got. I've never got a 7. I've never given myself a 7. And that was 4 times. So this may not be that interesting to you, but I just wanted to share it just to say that, like, it's fun to have access to this data in this way and be able to analyze it for ourselves. And what I love also, I mentioned this before, is just the ability to look at other people's sessions too and see how, like, with the same target, what did they get? And how much information did they put down? And how accurate was it? You know, it's just fun to creep on other people's sessions. So I'm still practicing the remote viewing. I want to talk a lot more about different psi abilities over the next couple episodes. I feel pretty inspired still by the psi games and especially Dahlia and just this mind sight phenomena. And I have so many thoughts about that, but since it's been 2 weeks and I'm going through a lot personally, I just wanted to jump on, talk about some remote viewing today, and then I'll be back with more soon. So thank you again, and if you haven't yet subscribed, please do. I'll see you next time on Shocks Talks.